So today we're going to talk about Inter Miami in the season preview, and despite the fact that Inter Miami is restricted in terms of their cap space because of the you-know-what rule that they broke back in September of 2020, they made a lot of signings this offseason, but also at the same time they let go a lot of players from their rosters last season. And you know how in the last season preview that I did with an Eastern Conference team that is the Chicago Fire, and how I talked about how they had a lot of squad turnover, and that it seems like they also kind of blow up their squad a little bit and start a rebuild. Well, Inter Miami is also doing the same thing this offseason, but they did it even in a more extreme way that I originally thought that they were going to do, because when you look at the amount of names that is no longer on this team. Now, granted, not all of them are actually out of this team. There actually are some players on this out list that is actually currently on loan with Inter Miami and look like they could potentially return to this team as soon as next season. But the fact that there's so many players that is out of this team and that I don't have enough room to do so, yeah, they basically are nuking their team. And in some way, they kind of had to do so because, you know, the first two seasons, the squad that they have built, it's just not been good at all. And it just feels like this is kind of the time to do so, though, you know, it's kind of weird that this is, of course, the time to do so because, again, they're still very restricted in terms of how to, of course, able to sign all these players and get them in a cap where they are still very restricted. And I've even mentioned before how this team, it feels like this season is going to be purgatory for this team. Like, I don't expect this team to really compete for a lot because they're still paying the punishment for the you-know-what rule that they broke a couple of years ago. But at least they're definitely making some progress and admitting that, you know, the squad that they built in the expansion year and also in the second year just did not work whatsoever. So we're just going to rip apart and hope that, you know, the second time we tried this, or at least this is the third time they're going to try this, is going to be the charm, and we can build a decent squad to compete for the playoffs. Now, last season, they finished with a 12-5-17 record and finished with 41 points and finished 11th in the Eastern Conference. And in the only other season that they were in the league, which is their expansion year, they made the playoffs as a 10th seed, but again, I'm not going to get too much into talking about how there's a lot of, you know, almost like an asterisk in terms of when they made it to the playoffs in their expansion year. And it seems like the MLS gods also kind of punished them in terms of the fact that, yeah, they made it to the playoffs, but yeah, they kind of got very lucky because of the fact that every other team in the Eastern Conference, well, actually not every other team, but literally all the teams that is like in the bottom half of the Eastern Conference was just pretty bad. And that, you know, as a result, you basically get a COVID outbreak, and they lost in that expanded players in that play-in round against fellow expansion side Nashville SC. Now, in terms of the transfer, and oh boy, here we go. This is where it's going to maybe take 2 or 3 minutes to talk about all these. Well, actually, not even 2 or 3 minutes, but maybe at least 5 or 6 minutes to talk about the ins and outs of this team, because there is a lot of names. This is probably the most I've seen a team in terms of adding players while also letting players go at the same time, which, in other words, this is probably the biggest squad turnover I've seen so far in terms of the season preview that I've done. Now, the players that they, of course, bought in, the biggest name that they, of course, bought in was Emerson Rodriguez from Millonarios. I believe they paid like $2.5 million to get him, so he is definitely a guy that I think this is kind of a guy that Inter Miami decided to sign because they're trying to go through the old formula again, which is go down to South America and specifically going down to Argentina and trying to see if they can find some hidden gems to basically build this team in a decent way, and then eventually maybe sell him off to Europe. But one guy that they definitely are hoping that they can maybe develop them before selling him off to Europe is G Monta. I've heard a lot of good things about this kid, and that there's a lot of good potential that he could be a decent player in MLS. So we'll see if that's going to be the case, as he's come from Santos. Then you got Chris McVeigh from Esbjerg, which is in Denmark. And then, of course, I think this is the first signings that they've done in the offseason, which was bring Ariel Lassiter to the Houston Dynamo, which is kind of a weird signing, although I guess maybe this is just a signing for them to get more depth in terms of that forward position. Speaking of depth, they also got Bryce Duke with LAFC, and again, Bryce Duke is a guy that I think he can be a decent player, and that the only problem of why he hasn't really got a lot of minutes to showcase his talent is that he basically joined one of the best team in the league, and that last season he did start to finally get some minutes, but hopefully with him coming to Inter Miami, he of course will get more minutes with this team, because again, I really rate this kid, and I think he can be a decent player in MLS. But obviously the biggest signings that they made this off season, besides talk about getting Emerson Rodriguez and G Malta, is DeAndre Yedlin. They got him just a couple of days ago from Galatasaray via the allocation order, and yeah, I mean, getting DeAndre Yedlin back to MLS. This has been something that's been said for the past couple of years, but it finally happened. He's finally coming back to MLS, and in some way, it's kind of surprising that when he does come back to MLS, I was kind of surprised he didn't think about going back to the Seattle Sounders, or even the Sounders, of course, think about getting him back. I mean, I guess maybe because the Sounders are already kind of pretty stacked in terms of the fullback position. No, didn't they also just sell Brad Smith to DC United? But anyway, overall for Inter Miami, this is definitely a big signing, and that I think this is a good example of the Chris Henderson connection, of the fact that Henderson, he knows DeAndre Yedlin doing his day with the Sounders, and maybe that's kind of the reason why he decided to come to this team. But yeah, I think this is gonna be a signing that Inter Miami fans can use this as kind of a hope that maybe things are definitely gonna get better, because they might have just got the best fullback and a U.S. men's national team fullback in their roster. Then they of course got Damian Lowe from Al Ittihad in the Middle East, a guy that has been kind of a forgotten name in MLS. I mean, remember when Damian Lowe was in MLS, and that again, I think this is similar to how DeAndre Yedlin comes to Inter Miami. The only way I could see why he wants to join this team is because of the Chris Henderson connection, and that being a former Sounders player. And it seems like we've also started to see there are some signings that Inter Miami has made are mostly kind of former Sounders player, and while some of course will have not worked out, there's also some that of course will work out, and we'll see whether or not if Lowe is going to be on that. I mean, I think DeAndre Yedlin will definitely work out, but I'm not quite sure about Damian Lowe though. And you got to also remember, he's only 28 years old. Like, it feels like he's been playing for forever, but he's only 28 years old, and he's still in the prime of his career. Then of course they got Mo Adams from Atlanta United, the first signing that they did in the offseason, before getting Ryan Sailor, Justin Ingram, and Lucas Meek in the super draft that they got this offseason. Now, in terms of players that is leaving this team, we'll start with Nicholas Figal, who is going to be going to Boca Junior. Now, I'm not quite sure if this is actually a permanent sale, that Figal is indeed going to be leaving Miami outright to go to Boca Junior, or the fact that it's going to be a loan. But either way, one thing that we know is that heading into next season, they will not have their two center back in this upcoming season, because the other center back, Leandro Gonzalo Perez, he's going to be going to River Plate. Now, I know for sure that he is actually he's only there on loan to go to River Plate, but there's also an option to buy, and if he does perform well with River Plate, and depending on how much River Plate will get in Inter Miami to get LGP, I will be surprised Inter Miami of course would accept that, because again, this is a team that is going into a new direction and trying to kind of rebuild this team and get rid of a lot of the dead weights that basically is the reason why they were not a competitive team in their first two seasons in MLS. They also lost Lewis Morgan to the New York Red Bulls, but they got a huge sum of general allocation money out of that deal. They also lost Ventura Alvarado, going to Liga MX in FC Juarez. They lost Calvin Leerdam going to the LA Galaxy. Jay Chapman going overseas to Dundee FC. Then they lost one of their backup goalkeeper, John McCarthy, going to LAFC. Patrick Seegers going to Memphis 901. Sam Guderi going to Loudoun United. Dylan Castilleja going to Atlanta United. And then, of course, Federico Higuain, who is actually kind of not retired, unofficially, or kind of officially unofficially retired yet, because he did sign that one-day contract with the Columbus Crew, and that he is actually going to be there with the Crew before officially announce his retirement. And it makes sense because, you know, Federico Higuain is definitely a legend in terms of Columbus Crew fans, and it just makes perfect sense, the fact that he decided to formally officially announce his retirement there. But even though he did sign that one-day contract, I'm still going to label him as he has retired, because he did, of course, announce that last season. Then they, of course, lost Christian McCoon to Sean FC, but again, they got a good sum of general allocation money out of that. They also have Rodolfo Pizarro going on loan to Rayados, but that also has an option to buy. They also lost Julian Carranza going to the Philadelphia Union, and the only free agent that or the only guy that is a free agent that left this team is Josh Penn. They also have Ryan Shawcross, who has also announced his retirement, and Indiana Vasilev returned to Stoke City after his loan spell ended with Inter Miami. So, optimism for this Inter Miami team. Well, there really isn't a lot of optimism if you're an Inter Miami fan, because you know that this is a rebuild year. Like, this is going to be a year where, especially with the amount of squad turnover that they have, it kind of feels like it's an expansion year all over again. It feels like 2020 all over again, where they're just trying to build this decent squad and hope that maybe they can get something going. But at least one thing that I think Inter Miami fans will be optimistic is Chris Henderson. I mean, I've said many times before, when Chris Henderson becoming the new GM of this team, this is probably the saving grace that this team has, because, you know, the previous regime, in terms of some of the decision making that they made, yeah, it was kind of the reason why they kind of had to offload a lot of their players, and how they were just kind of stuck in mediocrity in their first two seasons. But knowing the fact that Chris Henderson is here and started to finally getting rid of these dead weight, and started to bring in his guys, and started to finally form a vision that this team can be competitive. Yeah, I think that's one of the big hope that this team has, and one of the big hope that Inter Miami fans have with this team. Because again, after all, when you have a guy that worked with the Seattle Sounders before and built championship with the Seattle Sounders, you know he's going to be a decent GM. Now, the other thing that is optimism about this Inter Miami team is some of the depth weight is finally off low. So again, there are some players that were part of kind of the dead weight and kind of made this team be mediocrity, no longer on the books. And although there are still some of those dead weight that technically isn't officially off the books yet, one example is Rodolfo Pizarro, who, despite the fact that he's actually on loan with Monterrey, he still occupies one of the DP spot, because apparently I think the league has this weird rule where even if you loan a player to somewhere else and he occupies the DP spot, he still count as one of your DP slot, which I think that's kind of a ridiculous rule, because, you know, when you loan someone that is not on your roster or not playing for you, I mean, yes, he's still technically part of your roster, you just loaned to somewhere else, but, you know, that feels kind of wrong. The fact that, you know, you don't even get a chance to play them during this season because they're on loan, but they're still going to count as one of your DP spot. And I won't be surprised with how Inter Miami has operated. They might find ways to try to maybe sneak it in there, and maybe trying to get themselves a DP, not knowing the fact that Rodolfo Pizarro is still occupied as a DP, and that they're still locked in terms of having all free DP slot being filled. Though I at the same time, I don't think that's going to happen, because I'm pretty sure they probably learned from their mistake from a couple of years ago. Now, the concern for this Inter Miami team, again, you know, there really isn't a lot of concern if you're an Inter Miami fans heading into this season. I mean, ideally, the only concern you have is that this is going to be a long year and that it's gonna be very frustrating watching this team. But that's what rebuilding years is all about. Like, rebuilding years are not supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to have a lot of growing pains. And one of the thing about rebuilding year that a lot of fans always have concern is team chemistry. I mean, I said it with the Chicago Fire of how when they have a lot of new players in their team chemistry is going to be something that needs to of course be built with, and it's going to take a while before all these new players coming into the team can get good chemistry to kind of operate as a team. Signing a star player way past their prime for another big amount of money. Now, as much as I know that this might sound like a concern, I kind of maybe nitpick this a little bit because, first of all, Inter Miami don't have an open DP slot, and despite the fact that they're still kind of linked with these big name players overseas in Europe, I don't think this is going to happen. But I'm pretty sure Inter Miami fans are still kind of maybe concerned with that because I've said before, this league is transitioning into a time where you just simply cannot sign those kind of aging European star player and then play in MLS and hope that they're going to dominate the league and guide you to success in the playoffs. Like, that might have worked maybe about 5 or 10 years ago. It does not work nowadays in the 2022 era of MLS. So yeah, let's hope that Inter Miami don't make that same mistake again, and especially making that same mistake that when they signed Gonzalo Higuain, which he's definitely a big name player, but he's definitely a guy that kind of way past his prime. And although last season he did had a much better season compared to his first season, where he only ended up to score 1 goal, and that ends up to be probably one of the worst signing we've ever seen in league history. Yeah, they definitely don't want to, of course, make that same mistake again. And then lastly, the other concern about this team is Phil Neville itself. And again, I have heard a lot of fans are not happy about Phil Neville, and I don't blame them for not being happy with Phil Neville because, again, it is still shocking the fact that he is still with this team. And I think the only reason why he's still with this team is because he have that connection with David Beckham. But I just think that is there going to be a time where they need to realize that maybe Phil Neville is not the answer to lead to this rebuild. Because if this team, they don't show some progress in terms of this rebuild, I would say they need to, of course let him go. And that I also feel like, heading into this season when I do my coaching kind of panic, or not coaching panic index, but more like coaching hot seat index, I'm going to put Phil Neville near the top of the hot seat because, again, I mean, it's remarkable the fact that he lasted last season despite how bad this team was, and that I don't know if another year of him just kind of holding back this team, and especially holding back of them going through this rebuild, is a way for him to be staying with this team. Now, in terms of MVP for Inter Miami, yeah, I mean, I want to say Gonzalo Higuain because, again, he is still kind of the biggest name of this team. So I'll go with him, even though, there's also that question of whether or not do he still have enough in the tank to, of course, score goals. I mean, last season he kind of proved that he still have some left in the tank, and that I think he also scored like double-digit goal and started to kind of look like, well, actually not even kind of look like, but started to kind of be a player that Inter Miami think that he could be. But still, I feel like when you pay someone $7 million to only score like 11 goals, it's still not enough to justify that of course is a good signing. But other than that, there really is a lot of MVP in this team. I mean, in year past, I would have probably gone with Lewis Morgan because of how it seems like he's the only player that is really stepping up for this team. But now that he's no longer with this team, I can't even go with him. So I'm going to go with Gonzalo Higuain. Comeback player. This one's a much easier one. It's got to be Robbie Robinson. So it was a roller coaster year for Robbie Robinson last season. I mean, You know, he's been dealing with a lot of injuries, but when he does came back from injury last season, he really started to go on a good form, and then he made a very interesting decision to decided to pledge his allegiance to the Chilean national team, and then you know how, and then there was that problem of how Chile was not or their fans were not happy the fact that Robbie Robinson was going to be joining their national team and stuff like that, and it got really ugly in terms of that situation. But yeah, again, I think Robbie Robinson, he's definitely a guy that, you know, when he is healthy, and that is if when he's healthy, because he's been suffering a lot of injuries ever since he has came into the league and being the #1 draft pick of Inter Miami a couple years ago. He can be a decent goal scorer in this league, and hopefully with him being healthy this season, he alongside with Higuain could be a deadly force in that forward line. So yeah, I feel like he could definitely be a comeback player, and he could be a guy that if he can stay healthy throughout the entire season, he can easily be a 10+ goal scorer in this league. Now, expectation for this Inter Miami team. I mean, just get through this rebuilding and purgatory year with progress. I mean, you know this team is not going to make it to the playoffs. Like, unless if every piece start to work out in terms of the players that they sign. I think in terms of talent-wise, and especially how the East, with the way that I've seen a lot of teams have also upgraded their squad, and that it could be a little bit of a bloodbath in the Eastern Conference this season because there's a lot of good team. I don't think Inter Miami is at that level to be a playoff contender. Though, again, I don't expect that to be so, because this is a team that is clearly rebuilding and clearly trying to correct the mistake that they made in the first two season and building a roster that turns out to be mediocre. But also at the same time, you know, I said this is a purgatory year because this is kind of the punishment year for them for breaking the rules a couple of years ago, and until when they're finally free of that punishment and are a little bit more flexible and have more cap space to sign players, then I think that is the time where they can really start thinking about being a playoff contender. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and if you're an Inter Miami fan, what do you think, your optimism about this season, your concern, and also your expectation for this team for this upcoming season. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.